being so valiant and brave. David, remember, is the composer of songs that are both praise lofty and gut-wrenchingly transparent. Yet, chapter 22 opens with David in a cave in a place called Adullam. And it becomes obvious as to why he is there when you know that Adullam means in the original Hebrew, hiding place. So David is literally hiding from who? He is hiding from King Saul, who in a jealous rage will not rest until David is dead. In fact, David felt so out of options. We are told that he fled to his enemies and ended up in the hometown of Goliath the giant, who he slayed in the open valley between two nation armies. After asking to see the Philistine king Achish, David realizes that this was probably not such a good idea, especially if he was trying to spare his own life, and he, interestingly enough, begins to fake a spell of insanity. David, we are told, starts acting like he's a man gone mad, drooling down his own beard. Achish doesn't even feel right killing a crazed man rather than letting him live the rest of his life in the prison of his own insanity. David takes that opportunity then and runs from there as quickly as possible and finds this hiding place in Adullam, and there David sits in a cave. The gifted songwriting, giant slaying, anointed next king of Israel is in a cave hiding after faking being crazy in order to save his life from a jealous king who wants him dead more than he wants to obey God. It's amazing to me what following the path to destiny can sometimes entail. Interesting to me that some of the places and spaces in life God might make us have to plant in if, in fact, we are obediently attempting to follow him. No one would ever think that David would have this part of his testimony, from being called in from out back of his father's house and anointed by the prophet to be the next king of the nation of Israel, yet God takes him the route that best shapes his personality. He takes him the route that best conforms him in the image of his creator, the route that sharpens his gifts and deepens his convictions. God allows what will make him confront his deepest fears and release his crippling arrogances. He will know both high praise and deep pain. He'll know both victory and painful defeat. David will see the best and the worst of people. David will have to come to grips with the best and the worst of himself. And he will know what it's like to hear sisters sing about him in the streets and to have to barely avoid a spear aimed for the larger part of his body mass. David has taken the route that makes him the best servant for God he can be. And whether we like it or not, it includes this necessary stop and stay in a cave. We don't like talking about the cave stops on our way to power and purpose and possession and progress. Every one of us would prefer to go from barns in Bethlehem to the right hand of the Father and skip, if we could, having to go through Egypt in infancy, or towns throwing stones at us, or weeping over a friend's death, or being betrayed by those who walk closest to us, or given the kiss of death in a garden, or judged falsely in multiple courts, or beaten in preparation for the cross. Oh, as if the cross itself is not enough. I don't care, brothers and sisters, what lofty spiritual goals you have set for your life. I promise you that you will not easily volunteer for the cave stops in the Adullams that surround your life, but you're not going where God intends to take you without having to do your time in the cave. And might I add that you almost miss this when you read the story, because it's like the writer suffers from the same issues we all suffer from. We don't value enough the caves on the way to places of comfort and progress. We omit them intentionally from our stories until it makes other people confused when they can't escape having to do their time there. And I feel this, I guess, more than ever, because of how my life has been slowed down these many months, and then to have to hear again the echoes of fallen brothers on this American battlefield who have succumbed to the injuries inflicted by the weapon of white hate. What I already know is the protective immunity given to those who are supposed to protect and serve, who are armed not just with weapons, but with loaded rounds of extreme prejudice against people of color. The mourning has always been there. The rage has always been there. The feeling of helplessness has always been there. The feeling of threat from the moment you awaken to the moment you close your eyes. George Floyd's death hit me in the gut like all the previous ones, but the rage I feel because of the viral toxicity that is spread down from the top, that has given such open arrogance to the disregard for black men in America particularly, and black people in America more generally. The fear people have of our strength, the fear our ingenuity exposes in others, our grind and grit and confidence, our skill set and eclecticism, our intellect and artistry, our history and nobility, our mind and our muscle, our ability to bounce back from life's atrocities. We have so much to teach those who fear us so deeply that you're denying yourself the privilege of learning how to survive struggle and how to live grateful for such things as you have, how to survive pandemics and keep your head above water, how to love your God while walking in the duplicity of strength and surrender at the same time. This is what describes who we are. And it makes me feel like in this season we're in a cave to have to debate what is morally not even debatable. And I understand why the writer attempts to go so fast in verse 1 when he describes David in this cave in Adullam, and he makes it appear, if you read it too fast, it appears as if David is there for a brief moment, maybe a night, at best a couple of days. And then when his brothers and all of his father's house heard where they could find him, they went to the cave and joined him, and life started its upward climb to the throne from there. But oh, my friends, I wish those cave stops were that easy. But the writer leaves us to that space in the middle because he didn't want to tell you what I feel compelled to tell you, and it is this: between the A part of verse 1 and the B part of verse 1 represents anywhere from 3 to 6 months, which means David is in the cave from 3 to 6 months. Don't miss that. Verse 1 reads quickly, but if you read it too quick, you will miss the fact that between clause A and clause B is a 3 to 6 month span. What he has experienced in his life, the fear of Saul's rage, the confusion of carrying an anointing that has him hunted like a wild animal, the disorientation that made him think he could hide in the hometown of the most celebrated fighting giant in the town that incidentally he has killed, the music that makes him express both his love for God and his ambivalence for God at the same time. And for 3 to 6 months, David sits alone in a dark, dangerous, muddy cave. How did he process his life there? What did God do to minister to him there? What was poured into or purged from his life while there? What was in him so deeply that only isolation could bring it up and out of him? And what was so needed as an investment that only could be transferred from the cave? This is how you have to think about your stays and stops in life, brothers and sisters, your motion and abrupt cessation of the same. If in between stations of purpose, God purposes a stop in what amounts to a cave in my life, these are the questions I have to ponder while I do my time there. How do we think about these cave stops that are sure to be a part of our collective journeys to the places God intends for us? Well, the good thing about reading any portion of David's life is that wherever you find him in his journey, he at some point sat down and surrendered to composing his reflections in a song. The cave he sits in our focal text this weekend is reflected in the psalm he composes in Psalm 142. So that David is teaching us here, we emerge from the caves to live our best lives when we give ourselves permission to own the necessity of being there. I'll say it again. David teaches us that the only way you come out of the cave better and not bitter, having matured and not having imploded, is to, while you are in the cave, give yourself permission to own the necessity of being there. I have complained to God on more than one occasion about how I disagreed with God concerning the need for certain experiences that God apparently thinks is necessary for my spiritual progression. And there have been times where after he has taken me to the mountain peak and let me survive the valley plain, he has then settled me in a cave. And I have often wanted to argue with God, God, I didn't learn enough from the peak of the mountain. I didn't learn enough from the lonely isolation and darkness of the valley. Why did you have to then insert somewhere between the two the isolation of the cave? I've walked slowly, however, to a place of spiritual maturity that now sits in caves, and I'll do just what David does. If I got to do my time there, let me own it. Own that apparently this is where I am to produce something, if nothing more than a stronger me. This is bigger than simply emoting it and letting it hit your sensitivities. No, I mean own it. If you got to do your time in there, own it. Don't just try to rush through hard seasons without learning the lessons that God intends for you to emerge from the tough season having turned into spiritual convictions. If you got to do your time there, own it and produce something from there. And here's how David owns it. He says, I cry out loudly to God.